Okay. Well, thanks everyone for joining. We're going to go ahead and get started, and hopefully some other people will continue to join as we get going. So thanks for taking a little bit of time out of your day today. I know everyone's busy leading up to the end of the year, but Nathan and I wanted to spend a little bit of time today talking about the top 5 pitfalls to avoid when developing your data science team, and that's whether you're building the team from scratch or you're kind of fine-tuning an existing team. First, just to introduce ourselves, my name is Matt Cowell. I'm the CEO at QuantHub, and you are?
I'm Nathan Black. I'm the Chief Data Scientist at QuantHub.
And so we're doing a 5-part series, probably over the next 2 months or so. Today's the first in the series, and then we'll resume the series starting in January. And we're really focusing on those top 5 pitfalls. We'll do 30 minutes of content-ish, and then we'll leave some time for questions at the end. You should see a chat feature within the webinar, so if you have any questions, feel free to post those in the chat, and then that'll give us an opportunity to answer those questions once we get to the end. And if you have questions along the way, please, or thoughts, please post those as well. All right, so moving right along. So today we're going to be talking about failing to align the data science priorities with the needs of the business. I think this is a good place to start. Everything should start with strategy and kind of where you're trying to go, whether that's in data science, analytics, software, just business in general. So we're going to start there, and I think everything else kind of really comes from that or arises out of that.
And Matt and I, over the last few months, so we've really been traveling around, talking to a lot of people in the data science space, and this is something that we hit very regularly. Is that just aligning those priorities is a key challenge.
Yeah. And then the second part of the series will be working in silos and assuming all required skills are covered. That'll be the second week of January. It'll be on the 9th, and so we'll send out invitations for that shortly after this webinar as well. And so one question we just wanted to get out of the way is kind of why us? At QuantHub, what we really exist to do is to help companies build great data science teams. We're really a talent assessment company to do that, so we help validate data science skills and also help companies really build data science skills through ongoing skill development. But at the end of the day, we're really passionate about this field and passionate about helping companies build great data science teams. We both have a background in data science, Nathan more than myself. So we've certainly experienced these pitfalls. Nathan causes these types of things on a daily basis. So we have a lot of experience. Appreciate me saying that, I'm sure.
My background, I have about 5 years of building and leading data science teams, and a lot of the content that we're about to share, and a lot of the tools that we're building in QuantHub is a direct result of a lot of the challenges that we face building data science teams ourselves, and working in a consulting role, helping others build data science teams.
Yeah, so our intent today is to share our perspective, but certainly learn from your perspective as well. And so, huge fan of Simon Sinek, and he says always to start with why. So our first question is to really think about why your company is building a data science team, or why you're investing in analytics, what you want to get out of it. The answers that we tend to hear with this question, oftentimes, and this isn't everyone, so you may not fall into this bucket, but oftentimes, it's because your competitors are doing it, or because you have a lot of data and you aren't necessarily sure how to derive value out of it. So you're kind of jumping in and building a data science team to do so. AI is all the rage, of course, and so there's a feeling that we're all going to be left behind if we don't get a team in place. Mm-hmm. And there are other companies that we've talked to that aren't even necessarily sure yet why they're actually investing in data science. It just it seems to be the thing to do. And so none of these answers necessarily are all that great when it really comes right down to it. Particularly in what we're talking about today. If we really want to align with the strategy of the organization or the company, it's critical that we start with that. But instead, a lot of companies are rushing to put these teams in place. and aren't necessarily stopping and stepping back and taking that more strategic approach to it and trying to understand how data science can deliver, really deliver business value to the organization.
Yeah. And what we've been seeing is there's definitely a lot of hype, but there's hope in the hype. So, you hear all the buzzwords such as AI, big data, machine learning. You guys have heard them all. But you're also seeing actual results such as people being able to take their data across their organization and build, holistic profiles of their customers for hyper targeting. They're able to gain insights from their product usage and really drive some operational change using the data that exists.
Yeah, absolutely. We've certainly all heard the requirements, that come from not necessarily having that strategy really baked into what you're doing. The requirements of just give me all the data and I'll kind of know what to do with it when I see it, or let the data speak to us. Mm-hmm. And so, that's not necessarily the best strategic approach, I would say. And so the question is then, how do we get there from here? Where do we go if we don't necessarily have that tie back to strategy? And so, really to dive into that and sort of start unpacking that a little bit, let's talk about the path from data to value. So all organizations have some semblance of data, and certainly, data is proliferating at an incredible rate right now. I think 90% of the world's data was created in the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. And so just unbelievable proliferation of data. But in and of itself, data is just not all that valuable. You start kind of moving up the hierarchy from very tactical, which is just really a data, your data in any sort of data store you might have, to start gleaning insights from that data. And then ultimately, to really gain value from that data, you have to take some action. Mm-hmm. And so reporting, insights, those types of things are good, but if you don't actually do anything with it, you're not going to get any value. And so ultimately, it's the actions you take that lead to that business value. And this is relatively common sense. And so the challenge is, until you actually overlay that strategic filter, if you don't overlay a strategic filter on each one of those areas in terms of what data should we use? Mm-hmm. Most companies have more data than they know what to do with. What data should we use? What types of insights are we looking for? What should we just have that be an open-ended conversation, or should we actually target specific insights? And then, let's say we actually do both of those fine, we get actions. Now, how do we prioritize those actions? Mm-hmm. Which ones should we actually prioritize over another? And how should we approach them? How should we actually get them down to different teams? How should we organize? And then ultimately, where are we trying to glean value? Most organizations have some sort of strategy, and they might have a go-to-market strategy, a competitive strategy, pricing, where their sort of revenue plan. And, without actually some strategic overlay over these things, it's just hard to imagine that, this is all going to come together in a way that delivers a lot of business value.
Right. And, taking it to kind of a concrete level, if you think of actually just trying to plan travel, and you say, okay, I'm going to take a vacation, I'm going to go to Europe, and so a lot of companies will take an approach where they say, all right, what data exists out there? I don't know, just go on the internet and see what the internet tells you, see what the data tells you out on the internet. Well, starting with a question first, framing it in that strategic, well, what is your budget? What is your preferences? And then allowing that to guide every other step that is listed here in this hierarchy. So what data are you actually looking for? Well, maybe hotels, different sites to see, and allowing the questions that you have, or the goal that you have for that trip guide all of those efforts.
So I'm sure you're not just trying to plan a trip to Europe, although that sounds great. Actually, I would love to go to Europe, so thanks for bringing that up. But so kind of next is, what happens when you lack that? When you lack that strategy and vision, so you don't necessarily have that overlay. You have data, you're starting to actually try to take action based on data, but you're missing that strategic filter. And so, what typically happens there? There was just recently a really good article in the Harvard Business Review. It's actually on our blog, reposted on our blog, I believe. We'll send it out to everyone that's attended here later after the webinar today. But they talked about 5 essential elements for succeeding with data. And specifically, there's one element in here that that they hone in on, which is very relevant to the conversation today, which is a means to monetize. And so that lingo might be a little bit confusing, but basically it's the strategy aspect of this. There are a lot of other aspects, certainly having quality data, having the capability in the organization to do something with it. But without that strategy, again, you can't expect to actually achieve much business benefit. And this is kind of what that article dove into, and I thought was very timely and interesting for today. But if we unpack that a little bit and talk about why that is, the impact of strategic misalignment, what are some of those symptoms that you might be seeing in your own organizations? And I'd love to actually hear other ones that you might be experiencing in your organizations that we can learn from, and certainly talk more about in the Q&A at the end. But a few that we've seen before in our experience are on the screen right now in the form of over-budgeted projects. Some projects that just go on endlessly, and you spend a lot of money, you may never actually get to the end, or it's abandoned before you ever get there. Missed business outcomes, so a project that actually you think is finished, it's quote unquote finished, but you didn't actually deliver the business outcome, whether that was the ROI you were trying to hit or whatever. Poor customer satisfaction, delivering a solution, but actually having that solution be full of errors and things that actually negatively impact your customer. Low team morale, oftentimes churn in a project, or not necessarily delivering on business outcomes can really affect the morale of the team. And then sort of similarly to that, misaligned teams, where you're missing that strategic alignment, and so teams are all doing different things. There's overlap, they're not connected necessarily in a way that actually leads to the ultimate outcome.
There's a common theme with all these, just ambiguity. So in that, for the over budgeted projects, not a lot of times when we go into data science projects, right at this stage, a lot of data science projects are R&D efforts, and so making an effort to say, okay, let's not bite off more than we can chew. Let's have just small wins that we can get along the way. Missed business outcomes usually are the business outcome wasn't well defined to begin with, and low team morale. If you give an analyst just a bunch of data and say, hey, go create business value, they're going to come up with questions. They're going to come up with questions themselves. They're going to go pursue those questions, and then they're going to come back with a report that may or may not be aligned with what you're actually wanting to answer. And so that's a little demoralizing for an analyst whenever you go, well, that's great, but
yeah. And so if we jump into, Nathan was talking about kind of specific example of what causes that type of thing. Here are some other examples. So that unclear business need, and also that you don't have a true north necessarily. So I always like to think about strategy as your sort of strategy and vision and your mission as sort of that true north, that you, no matter where you are, if you're disoriented, you can always look and find that true north. And that's what a strategy should be. So in the absence of having that clarity, then you can imagine projects then, and you've all been on them, we've been on them, where there's just a tremendous amount of requirements churn, or just a lot of churn around, are we actually going in the right direction? Are we going to deliver the outcome? And when you don't necessarily have that strategic guideline, then your chances of actually hitting that are pretty limited. And so because of that, that's when you end up with that type of high requirements churn, all stemming back from that unclear business need. And that gets projects canceled. In my experience on the projects that I've been on that went way over budget and ended up being canceled, it was almost always because of that. That was the number one reason that I've seen. Another one is misalignment of metrics and poor decisions. When you incentivize a team, oftentimes you will get the behavior you're incentivizing. And so again, if you're not necessarily clear as to where you're going and why you're going in that direction, then it's likely that your incentives for a team are going to be, to some degree in the wrong direction. I'm going to talk about the next couple.
Yeah, and I think, again, bringing it back to a concrete example, we were working with a customer service team, and they had a mandated metric of response time for helping with customer issues. And diving in a little bit, you find out that no one had a clear metric for that response time. So without having that clearly defined what you're actually trying to do, any kind of effort to say, well, let's recommend staffing, or let's route different issues to different areas, those efforts are not going to amount to much if you don't clearly define what needle you're trying to move.
Yeah. And so you can end up with models directed at the wrong outcomes if your outcomes aren't that clear, uncoordinated efforts across teams. So a lot of these lead to the things we talked about a few minutes ago. It leads to low team morale, poor customer satisfaction, certainly when you have models directed at the wrong outcomes, or if you're not clear as to what outcome you're pursuing, your model validation is likely to actually not be catching the right things. And so all of those things lead to those kind of missteps we talked about. And so, that all sounds not so great. And so what the question is then, what do we actually do about that? What is the solution? And so I would say it is pretty simple. You just need to map your strategy to actions, and then call it a day. I think the webinar, we probably just finish here. Everything's fine. You just take your strategy, map it to an action, and then you're good.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward.
So you guys.
So that's not all that straightforward. Most companies actually struggle with this. What I found, my background actually is in a CTO role at a software company for a long time before coming to QuantHub and pursuing what we're trying to do here. So my background is a lot on the product and software development side. And what I found in really digging more deeply in the data science and analytics field, I had some experience in that, but not as much as I have at QuantHub, is that there are a lot of similarities between these fields. I would say that the product and software side has experienced the same issues that we're experiencing now in analytics, but they experienced them before we did. So they're a little bit past where we are on the analytics side, and that they figured out some solutions to these problems. Certainly, they're not all solved, but there are definitely some good lessons to be learned from that field, or that segment of our field, and apply those to the analytics space.
So the idea there is that it's a bit more mature.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so some lessons learned.
Yeah. And so we want to walk you through a couple today. One of the areas that I've seen that is not as pervasive in this field, in the analytics field, as it is in the product development world, is product management, and really recognition of the strategic value of product management. The role product manager is meant to be at the core, or at the intersection, really, of the customer, technology, and the business. This is the role that's really all about taking and deeply understanding the business strategy of the organization, deeply understanding what the customer needs, and also understanding what's possible from a technology perspective. They're not necessarily the solution provider, but to understand what's possible from a technology perspective and bring that all together into a strategy, that actually leads to solving customer problems and creating a great business outcome for the company.
Matt, this kind of reminds me of the similar Venn diagram for data scientists that has computer science, mathematics, and business So how do you see that comparing?
Yeah, that's interesting. It makes me think of a horse-looking creature with a single horn coming out of it. I believe it's a unicorn. And so it is interesting that that Venn diagram exists. And so trying to find someone, in my experience, trying to find someone that has exceptional technical skills, so a great computer science background, they're great at mathematics, and then also strong in the business. I just don't know many people like that. And I don't think it's just a coincidence that I don't know many people like that. I don't think there are that many people like that. Those are really, really hard skills to come by in a single person. And so on the software development side, honestly, I don't think that's as big of a focus. In my experience, I love finding those people, but I'm okay finding the super technical person that has empathy for customers and can understand the business, but isn't necessarily the one translating the business. And so on the analytics side, my thing is I'm not sure why we're looking for those three skills. Certainly the business skills are critical, but I would say let's actually start leveraging product managers more to provide some of that business context and leveraging that skill set for what product managers are great at, which is actually, what's on the screen right now, the intersection of the customer, the technology, and the business, and bringing those things together with data science, so shoulder to shoulder, peer to peer, with data science leadership and analytics leadership to forge a strategy.
So do you think that product managers can just transfer over, or is there's some different kind of flavor of that would be?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the organization. So I think in many cases you will have people that are in product management inside of an organization, and they may have some analytics aptitude, and they may be a good fit for more of a data-oriented product manager role. But certainly I would look for someone that has some analytics aptitude. I don't think they need to be a data scientist, but they need to understand data and analytics. But it's going to depend on the company and what types of people they have inside. I think the keys for a product manager are that you find someone that has that analyst mindset, someone that asks the question why all the time. They understand business strategy. They can talk to the executives about the business strategy, and they have an empathetic heart for customers. And so if you have those types of people, they don't have to be in a product management role today, but they may be a great fit for that type of role in the future. So the second key concept, and it's very much in alignment with what we just talked about, is a concept called product owner teams. And this is what it's called in my background on the software development side and the product development side. You may have seen it called the triad, and there are a couple different forms of this. But the key concept here is, even though I just talked about the product management being really a critical discipline, the reality is finding someone that actually has all of that and can have excellence or really exhibit excellence in knowing what's technically possible and feasible, knowing what's valuable to the business, and also really what's usable to customers. Even that's actually very difficult to find in one person. So what we had great success with in the past was forming actually a product owner team. And in that way, we would actually have a representative from the business, and that would be typically a product manager, or it could be a business executive. I always love the term, by the way, the business, as if we're not all in the business. It's kind of a weird term to me. But product managers are good fits for that. And their focus is really on what's valuable. What's valuable to the organization, what's valuable to customers. And then you bring in a technical data science or analytics lead and into the product owner team, and they're really thinking about what's feasible, starting with what's possible, but then what's feasible. What's feasible for the business to actually invest in and create. And then somewhere along the way, you better actually represent users and figure out what's usable. And in design, people with design skill sets or data visualization skill sets are really exceptional at thinking about the user first. And so this kind of team, if you're struggling on decomposing strategy into action items, I would definitely recommend standing up a team like this. It doesn't have to be a large team. It's just a 3-person team. Find 3 people that are good in these types of areas and sit them together and have them actually focus on decomposing that strategy of the company into an actionable plan for analytics, rooted in what's valuable, what's actually feasible technically, and what's usable from a user and customer standpoint. And I think that goes a long way to starting to actually break down that divide between your strategy and your tactical actions.
That's interesting. When first started talking about this, one thing that distracted me a little bit was the product aspect of it. You know, data science is not necessarily app development, even though some, you know, apps get data science behind them.
True.
And so for me, it was helpful to think of the principles that could be applied and framing these and borrowing what's actually applicable to the data science team.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually tried to think of a new name for this, but my creativity was limited at the time. So product owner teams is what they're called on the product side, but it's really the corollary concept here with data science leadership, data visualization, folks in product management. It still makes perfect sense, I think, the concepts. So particularly when we're talking about the challenge of decomposing strategy into actions. And then a few other considerations of things that could actually really help in terms of, again, taking a strategy and then making sure that your actions and your data science and analytics roadmap is mapped back to that strategy. A couple things that I found are very, very helpful just in this type of situation with this type of challenge is one is using a framework called OKRs. It's called Objectives and Key Results. You'll find it, if you haven't heard of it, just search OKR and you'll find a lot of articles on it. It's an excellent framework. I think it was started at Google. You'll find a lot of tech companies have adopted this. And it's an excellent framework at really two things. One, connecting teams and the goals that they actually have to make sure that they're all in sync in terms of the goals that they're actually pursuing. That's one thing. And then the second thing is actually connecting the strategic goals of the entire company and mapping that really down into the individual goals of each team. And I've seen that be so much more effective than just doing individual like goals for Nathan or goals for myself. OKRs are a much, much more effective way to actually translate the overall objectives for the company into the objectives for individual teams. And in many cases, people don't actually set individual objectives; they'll just set them at a team level. Because typically, in this field, in these days, in this day and age, we all work in teams, and so I've seen that be very effective. The second thing is, you know, a lot of you may be tasked or maybe focused on creating business plans, and so business plans are okay. Certainly, it gets you to think about a lot of assumptions. It gets you to actually think through, you know, how you actually plan to generate revenue, what's your customer acquisition model, what value are you delivering to your customer. Those are all extremely valuable things. The problem with business plans are they tend to be a little long and they're extremely time consuming to create and they're filled with assumptions. And so I don't tend to like to write 40-page documents full of assumptions. I don't really know 40 pages worth of material for certain. And so one of the techniques is called the lean canvas. And it's actually a one-page, it's a one-page deliverable and it has all the same elements of the business plan. And it's very focused on, again, taking your strategy and decomposing it down into the individual elements of that strategy. What's your unique value proposition? What's the problem you're solving? What segment of your customer base actually cares? And these are very strategic type of topics and decisions that, again, will get you very focused on the strategy that you're employing, not just the tactics, of it. And it's a much, much more lightweight model. It's very easy to adopt. There's some good information online about it and some good examples of doing it, and it's really, really easy to get started. The next two things I would say are around how you actually function. So one thing I think is really valuable is having a lot of transparency, not just transparency into what the team's doing for management, but actually transparency across teams. And so one of the things that's been very effective in my past that I've seen be very effective at other companies is actually having transparent displays of progress or almost reviews of progress and the entire team's in there. And so that's very valuable in surfacing dependencies that one team has on another team, but also very valuable in identifying opportunities or potential synergies between teams. And so when you're, again, thinking about making sure all your teams are rowing in the same direction in pursuit of some strategy, having teams actually be able to see the bigger picture together and see what we're all working on in some sort of recurring format frequently can be invaluable. Because all the action's actually happening in that team anyway. And so having them see it could be your best way to actually encourage that type of collaboration. And then the last thing I would say is small iterations versus big bang. And Nathan kind of alluded to this earlier. But if your concern is that you're not necessarily, or you're experiencing some of the symptoms we talked about earlier, and so you're not necessarily aligned with your strategy, then waiting to deliver for 9 months, 18 months, and doing big bang deliveries of value or analytics projects, that's a long time before you really realize that you're off track. So delivering in small iterations is exceptionally valuable to actually see what's happening and to course correct if you know that you're actually a little bit off course.
Well, the only thing I'd add is just that this is not a one step and done type of suggestion, that once you figure out the business strategy, that needs to be repeated over and over.
Absolutely.
That we call it the so what factor when we're doing projects, and it's been the factor that determines success versus failure in projects that I've done in the past. Is we sit down, look at the efforts, and say, so what? Where did that tie back to what we're actually trying to accomplish? And then when you're talking with the teams, when you're talking with the various stakeholders, continuing to bring up what we're trying to do in this project is move needle X. And how does what you just showed me do that?
Yeah, well, I think that's an awesome point. What that actually makes me think of is kind of back to the role of the product manager and the types of people you want to have on the team. The people that ask so what is critical to have those people on the team. And to me, that's a big part of the value of product management, is that they're constantly asking that question of why does this matter? Of why, why are we doing this? What does it matter to the business? Why does it matter to customers? And so to ask that question constantly is just so critical in getting there in the long run. And so that's really all we had in terms of content today. Just kind of a recap, I think the strategic value of product management in helping you align with strategy, and then consider doing that instead of a single person. Consider forming a small group of a product manager, a sort of technical or analytics leader, and then someone that's really strong at visualization and design, and bring that group together and sit them together and have them actually kind of siloed off for some period of time, a short amount of time, to sort of figure out where how you can actually get that connectivity back between the strategy and what the team's focused on. And I wouldn't necessarily have that be executives. They're too far removed from what's happening at the team level. Wouldn't necessarily have that be team members either, because they're too far removed from the strategy. So the ideal people for that type of initial group would be sort of mid-level leadership. So maybe your director of data science, maybe a more senior business person or product management person, for that initial group to sort of start rectifying that situation. Okay, well, we really appreciate you all joining today. I wanted to actually open it up for questions, if there are any questions. So I'll wait actually for a second here while you ask questions, or any thoughts or in general, or things that you wanted to mention that we'd love to hear about. Go ahead and type those into the question thing on the webinar. One thing that I see a question here. One question is, what companies are actually good at this? You want to take that one, or you want me to talk about that one?
If you want to give the Airbnb.
Yeah. So one company that we've done a little research on in preparing for this and thinking about this challenge is Airbnb. And everyone knows them, and so probably has used them. And so I would definitely encourage you to. There are a lot of articles and almost case studies that are written about Airbnb and really how data science and analytics has been core to their business. How they've really developed an extremely data-driven culture, and it's an exceptional model to follow from an analytics perspective. And one of the things that I really liked that I read about Airbnb is that they've really done a nice job of making sure that each team, each analytics team is very focused on the business. So one of the questions, and we'll actually address this in one of our upcoming webcasts, is when you're forming an analytics organization, is it best to have it centralized or decentralized? And so what I like about Airbnb is they said, which this is normally the case with anything, there are pros and cons of either way. So they've actually taken a little bit more of a hybrid approach, and that they are centralized with their analytics team because they want consistency across analytics practices. They want career development opportunities and skill development opportunities to be consistent across the organization. But within that analytics organization, they have teams segmented by sort of product line or business unit. And that way they're very, very focused on the business. And they've tried it the other way. They tried it centralized. And they found that they were actually starting to stray from the business strategy of the organization and the business problems they were solving. And so what happened was their analytics teams were starting to get more and more and more tactical. And so it actually is very similar to what we were talking about earlier with that product management mindset, thinking about the business, thinking about the customer. They found the exact same thing. And so they moved away from a purely centralized to a bit of a blended model so that they were always focused again on the business and the customer. And I thought that was a great example of that actually working. Let's see, what other questions do we have here? Okay, one other question is actually what resources or books do we recommend from this sort of perspective? One that I would actually one that I really enjoy from a product management perspective. My favorite book ever. Is called Inspired, How to Create Products that Customers Love. It's by a guy named Marty Kagan, C-A-G-A-N. We'll certainly post that later to all of you that have attended. It's an awesome book about the mindset of product management, and it's one that I think is very influential in the product management space. He talks a lot about product managers focusing on what's valuable, feasible, and usable. He kind of talks about that intersection. He talks about the sort of product owner model some, and so he's a great resource. He actually runs a firm that does this type of work. It's the Silicon Valley Product Group, svpg.com, and they are a great resource for product management. Another book that I love is called Monetizing Innovation. Just read that one actually in the last year. That's one of my favorites as well. And it sounds like it's all about pricing. It's not. It's really all about determining what the customer wants and how to strategically approach that. And so that's another great read, kind of along these lines.
That's good. Yeah, and maybe we can put together a resource list.
Yeah, definitely.
There's several that I'd like to add to that. The machine platform crowd is a great read. And then one I'm reading right now, which was recommended by AT&T, was the Accelerate.
Okay. Yeah, that is a good one. Yeah, we've talked about that one before. Okay. Well, we really appreciate everyone joining. One more thing for today is we had mentioned in the invite that we were going to give away one of these super cool app-enabled robotic balls, these spheros. You actually see these on the Apple commercials now. So we were going to give one of these away to one of the attendees. Brian, do you want to draw a number for us? Okay, let me see it. Okay. William Chen is actually the winner of the Spiro mini ball. So William, we appreciate you joining, and we'll connect with you later, and we'll get your address and send you the cool robotic ball. As long as you send us a video of you actually controlling it with your phone. All right. Well, everyone, thanks for joining us today. We'll actually send the slides out to everyone that joined, and certainly we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar, which will be Wednesday, January 9th at 2 Eastern Time. And Nathan and I will talk more about working in silos and assuming all required skills are covered. So we'll really start getting into the dynamics and kind of the essence of the team. And Nathan will probably lead that one, given your experience in data science, and I'll play color commentary on that one. So thanks a lot for coming. I hope all of you have a great rest of the year, and we will see all of you in January on the 9th. Thanks.